you were saying about the social engineers. And again, C.S. Lewis seems to have presaged this entire conversation, because his view on this is fascinating. Because so we've got this deluded group of social engineers who think, actually, no, we are the universal men. We are outside of time and space and the particularity of the human body, and we're going to engineer society.
Yeah.
But where would someone like that find a value set? Right? In what way would you engineer society? And the only answer is mechanistically. So it can only end up being utilitarian. So it can only end up degrading things. Because to be against the value of pain and suffering is actually to be against hard work. It's to be against achievement. It's to be against self-sacrifice. It's to be against labor, really. The consequences of these things that change you as a human. But if you're outside of the universe, well, how can you have flaws? You know, if you're literally outside, outside of time and space, and you always exist in a never-ending eternal realm, then you've got nothing to say to the human, and you don't understand the human perspective. And so these people, they would say, well, okay, we're going to engineer humanity in a certain way, but they can't explain how they would come to the values they would impose on future generations of humans.
Yes.
And this means that essentially all they're left with are the unspoken presuppositions that they, as humans, which they are, deluding themselves into thinking that they're universal men, have inherited from nature. And so C.S. Lewis calls this sort of nature's final revenge over man, because man thought, oh, I'm conquering nature. I'm creating paracetamol, and I'm creating medicines, I'm mechanical things, and I'm going to craft the universe. And it ends with the social planner crafting a man who can't even see himself as a man, using the primordial values that nature put into him, because he can't construct any new ones of his own.
I want to introduce a tragic feature.
I think that is
of
tragic.
Life in the conversation, because this is essentially where what we are going to be discussing, value monism and value pluralism. And one of the main motivations for value monism is precisely what you described. It's the kind of utopian sentiment. Now, I have it's easy to say, okay, utopians are stupid. And to a degree, this is right. But I
wouldn't say stupid, I would say deluded.
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and try and understand why someone may be attracted to utopianism. Because I think that if we give people we disagree with the benefit of the doubt, we can gain a better understanding of where they come from, and we could possibly find better ways of talking to each other, but also understanding the kinds of threats we are faced with. So the social engineer would say something of the following. Yes, I do try to be a universal man, and even if there are limitations imposed to me by, let's say, my particular nature, it is still a worthy project, because every other system that has kept that has been adopted by human beings hasn't led to, let's say, reduction of conflict or the improvement of our lives. We are still left with a kind of a human, suffering view that we haven't really progressed. So what they are going to say is that, well, what is the, and this may sound like a villain from a dystopian novel, but this is what makes them interesting.
And we are under their thumb,
Yes, that ultimately, why should we accept a more tragic view if that more tragic view locks us into suffering? If there is any chance we are going to exit suffering, it's going to be by trying to exit it, not by accepting it and having the moral systems that actually perpetuate suffering.
So I find this fascinating, because to try and escape suffering is probably the lowest of animalistic values. It is literally anything with a nervous system, millions of years old. A slime wandering around on the bottom of the ocean before life has arrived on the land. tries to escape suffering. It is the lowest of values, the lowest possible value. And so this person who thinks to themselves, well, I'm trying to escape and achieve like the highest value, and their highest value is merely the elimination of suffering. Like that's a really, really low basic value that required no thought to come to, but almost every living thing that has ever lived has always naturally tried to attain, and required no brain power on your part. So, and that's utopia, is it? Where we just don't feel any pain. That's hilariously to me that hilariously undermines their thesis that we're such smart and clever and universal men. No, you're totally parochial. You're a slime on the bottom of the ocean that's just trying to avoid the sulfur vent or whatever it is. They and also this kind of mechanistic value anti-realist. Oh, I don't. Metaphysics and value. No, you're showing your values right there, right? You want everything to be reduced to the state of lowest common denominator. You are expressing your values because you can say, well, I want a world without suffering. It's like, no, I want suffering. I'm pro-suffering. I actively value suffering. Now what can we say to each other?
So it depends what we count as suffering. And this was also the theme of previous symposium that I did with Rory on Schopenhauer. Yeah. Because there is such a thing as a very, let's say, extended view of what suffering is. That's a concept that basically involves suffering. Like, okay, you were rejected by a girlfriend.
Yep.
Boo-hoo. You suffer.
That's suffering.
It is.
You were misgendered. That's suffering.
Yeah, but that's excessive.
I agree with you. I totally agree.
The kind of suffering I have in mind is much more tragic. It's the kind of, just imagine the life of people who were basically slaves of other people in fleets, and they were dying in a naval battle because they were rowing, and they had a horrified death.
Yeah, and
or others who were tortured by the Assyrians.
Yeah, like
that's suffering. It's not having a girlfriend, a woman say no to you.
I totally agree, but the underlying continuum where it's being rejected by a girl to burning to death in a Roman fleet fighting the Carthaginians or something, where you can't escape and you're chained to the oars or whatever, right? Burning to death on that continuum of awfulness is still the continuum of suffering, right? And so the value monist can only see the continuum of suffering and can't place any value higher than that. And so, whereas I am with you on this one, like obviously, like the continuum of, I mean, it's probably not even a straight line. It's probably like that, right?
Yeah.
Where, or some strange squiggly line. And there are other values that intersect over this. And you say, okay, it is not pleasant to be rejected by a girl.
Yes,
but it's also not pleasant to remain an adolescent for your whole life.
Yes.
And if you want to be a man, you have to get rejected by a girl at some point. I cannot think of it. It's a rite of passage.
Yes.
To properly grow up, to have your heart set on this girl. You've longingly looked at her for months and months and months. You go up to her and she's just like, no, I'm not interested. And your heart breaks. And you have to pick up the piece and think about why this happened, what you did wrong, what signals, and eventually you grow and you change as a person and you move into the next stage of your life, which is being a sort of more self-actualized adult man.
Yes.
I value that, right? So,
Same.
But, I don't think you need to, if burning to death on a galley ship, well, that's not above, that's not underneath this thing. No, it is underneath this thing, try and avoid that, but don't try and avoid getting your heart broken. That should happen to you at some point in your life, really. So the problem with the value monists is they've only got this line, whereas there are all other lines, crossing over it all the time.
I think we should flesh this idea out a bit, because when we are talking about the value monist, it's not entirely. It's still a bit vague. And also when we're talking about a value pluralist, it's still a bit vague, because there are all sorts of ways and value system that could be monistic,
Mhm.
and there are also other pluralistic value systems. So essentially, both positions, both value monism and value pluralism, are, you could say, realist positions.
Mhm.
They do think, their supporters do think that there is such a thing as objective value, that we are trying to somehow understand and cognize, and also use in guiding our actions. So they do think that there are values, and they are objective. What is their main difference is that the value monist thinks that there is one and only one ultimate or fundamental value, which means they could have different answers. So you could have a value monist that says, well, the fundamental value is pleasure satisfaction. That's hedonistic.
Yeah.
You could say hedonistic utilitarianism.
Yeah.
You could have another value monist who says that the one and only one value is obedience, and strict obedience to a top-down hierarchical order. Or other people, you could say one is, liberation.
Yep.
A value monistic, which can get incredibly tyrannical.
Yep.
So the value monist says that there is one and only one fundamental value, and all other values are instrumental in promoting it. And there's a further twist that a person called Isaiah Berlin, who is credited with basically being one of the pioneers of value pluralism. He was a Cold War liberal in the 20th century. He was saying that there's a really pernicious thing in the mind of lots of value monists, that they are creating these vast metaphysical systems and these vast ethical systems, and they're trying to claim that there is such a thing as a final equation, or there is a final solution, and that there is one and only one way of life, and there is one which promotes the one and only one value, and basically in there is no really sacrifice. That's the twist. He would say that a lot of them, they're saying that you are not really sacrificing other values. So in that state, liberty is equality, equality is justice, justice is mercy and compassion, compassion is obedience, obedience is liberation. They would say that basically all of these values are one and the same, or they're aspects of the same thing.
Yeah, the sort of facets of the same underlying substructure. Yeah.
Yes. And they would say that insofar as we think that there are differences, we haven't really found out that solution, or that equation, that equation about value that will give us all the answers and will show us the one and only one way to live that realizes the one and only one fundamental value.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.